If you're at the beginning of your divorce process, I'm sure that you have so many questions and are very concerned about what is going to happen. Without a doubt, divorce is a life-altering event, and it needs to be approached with careful deliberation. The best way to relieve some of the anxiety is for you to have your questions answered, for you to have a good sense about what will happen next, and an understanding of where things will end up. We try to provide that clarity to all of our clients at the beginning of each case through a structured onboarding process. Let me describe what the onboarding process is. Each new client has a one-on-one meeting with their attorney. It's preferable if this meeting is in person, though it can take place over Zoom or one of the other video platforms. The process begins with the attorney taking a history of your relationship with your spouse. The history begins with when you actually met your spouse, how you came to be married, how the marriage progressed, when the breakdown started, and how you came to the decision that your marriage will end in divorce. With this information, we can anticipate whether the divorce will be contentious. We can talk about the impact on the time it will take to get the divorce and the cost of the divorce if there is acrimony between you and your spouse. We can talk about how to de-escalate the hostilities. If your spouse has a substance abuse issue, we will talk about how that will affect child custody. If there are health issues, like mental health issues, we strategize on how to navigate around that. So for example, if you and your spouse are reasonable and you don't expect a war, we would discuss starting your divorce by making a settlement proposal to avoid litigation. On the other hand, if your spouse has narcissistic tendencies and there is acrimony in the relationship, we would discuss how to control the chaos and vitriol that are going to be caused by those tendencies. So the history of the relationship is important because it helps predict how the divorce process will go. Your earning history, your spouse's earning history, and the financial status of the marriage is also discussed. It's important that you have an idea as to what the amount of assets that each spouse will leave the marriage with. We analyze the retirement asset. We consider which assets are marital, which assets are not marital, what assets one spouse has to the exclusion of the other. We look at debt, where the debt came from, who should be responsible, and how should the debt be divided. Depending on how much you earn and how much your spouse earns, we consider whether or not alimony is likely to be an issue. If you have a home, we discuss the approximate value of the home, as well as how much mortgage remains. We consider where the down payment came from to determine whether you will each share equally in the equity in the home. If there are children involved, we'll discuss each child with you and any concerns you may have for that child. We'll discuss what you believe is in their best interest and why. With this information, we'll be able to make a plan. The plan will start with a discussion on where you want to end. So in other words, if you want sole custody, we want to start with that and look backwards. We would like to know what you want to happen with the family home. What custody arrangements would be best for the children. We'll talk about what's likely to happen and what probably won't happen. We'll talk about the cost involved in reaching a settlement agreement outside of court and the time involved with that approach. We'll talk about what will happen if you're unable to reach an agreement with your spouse and if you're headed toward litigation. We'll talk about what is involved with the court processes, the cost that is likely to be incurred, and the amount of time it's likely to take. To prepare for your onboarding session, you should think through and write down all of your questions. You should definitely have a handle on all of your and your spouse's income and assets. You should know your debt. A recent tax return is always helpful. A current mortgage statement is also helpful. We would like to be able to break down the debt and know who's responsible for the debt. It's important to come to the onboarding meeting with as much information as possible regarding all of these things. The exact number is not what's important. Current statements are definitely not needed, but we do need relatively good, reliable information. With the consideration of all of that information, we'll be able to look at your goals. We'll be able to fine-tune those goals and make them consistent with what is likely. We'll be able to put the plan together